Well, welcome everyone. I'm Steve Savant, and we're broadcasting live from the heart of Phoenix, Arizona on KXXT Family Values Radio. And I also want to welcome our online audience on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. I want to be able to give a shout out right now to Beyond Fear to Freedom, one of the best Christ-centered fellowships that provide a safe and loving community for women in recovery. And just go out to their website and check out their Friday night. Starts at 5:30, Food and Fellowship, 6:15, their program. If you go out to their site at beyondfeartofreedom.org, it'll have all the information on locations, times, and there's even a men's side of that equation, and childcare is provided. I also want to shoot my email out there. It's steve@180youtube.com. That's steve at YouTube. Did I say YouTube? 180uturn.com. 180uturn.com. Steve at 180uturn.com. You want to write me, go ahead. And I want to talk today, we're talking with Vanessa Sarzoza, and I've known Vanessa for a little while.
Yes.
Right? Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, this is your story. This is your testimony, and I have to say, it's a blockbuster. I reread it again this morning, just before I got up. I was drinking my coffee. I'm always amazed. I've been in prison almost 16 years. I've heard everybody's stories. I don't know why they bother me still, but they do.
Right.
And yours did too. Tell me, where'd you grow up, Vanessa?
I actually grew up in New Mexico / Arizona.
Mm-hmm. And did you have, what kind of family life did you have?
I grew up in a real abusive family. My dad was very abusive. He was an alcoholic, and he would turn on us and just, it was an experience that wasn't very loving and kind and considerate, and it was injustice, right? I ended up, my brother, Rodney, he grew up with the abuse dad as well. My mom was a workaholic. She was hardly ever home because she stayed away. And so my brother became abusive because my father was abusive, and it ended up becoming a spiral situation. We had a lot of racism in our home as well. Because
racism in what way?
Well, my dad was Caucasian. He is a Canadian, and my mom was a dark Hispanic. So when my brother was born, he came out dark-skinned, and because of that, my family kind of shunned him, my dad's side, because they didn't think he was his. And when I came out of my mom, I was more of a light-skinned, and so I was treated different. So growing up, my brother resented me and made me hate my skin because of what I was born white, and I didn't ask to be white. And so there was a lot of abuse there as well.
When you say abuse, you're talking about physical abuse?
Physical and mental and emotional abuse throughout my whole life.
So you know what it's like to take a beating?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, today, of course, we're on the flip side of this whole child behavioral issue, which is nobody's spanking at all, right?
Right.
They're trying to go down that road. But in your life, it was not appropriate discipline, it was way out of line discipline.
Absolutely. It turned into an abuse situation because we weren't just getting spanking because of what we done wrong. We got spanked because we were a burden to them. We were a mishap. It was an inconvenience to their lifestyle that we were around. My mom was never abused. It was more of us children because we were in the way. Just your brother and sister? My brother.
And yourself?
And myself.
Got it. You're brought up Roman Catholic?
Yes.
Did that play at all into your thinking?
So, as a Catholic, I go to church and it's brimstone and hell, right? If you don't do what God has called you to do, then you're going to hell, no matter what. And so, as I was being raised up in this abusive and controlling home, and God to me was this abusive and controlling God. And I didn't want nothing to do with him. So as I grew up, I hated and resented the whole God thing, and I resented my family because my mom promised a lot of things and never came through, and my dad was always being abusive and controlling. And so I just grew up like, I'm going to do me, and they can do them.
In your vision of God, super disciplinarian, looking for something that might go wrong and judging you on it. But the bigger issue I thought was in your story was I thought this thing is you could never be good enough in his sight.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about never being good enough. I mean, your dad never, this is happening from your father. Now it's happening from your so-called heavenly father. I mean, this is a big issue.
Right. I never wanted a man to control me or hurt me or tell me that I was a bad person ever again. And so God to me was just this controlling God. And I'm like, you know what? And I see people pray to him and all this stuff. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to stay on my lane and he can stay on his, because I don't want no part in controlling my life, because I've been controlled for so long and disciplined and hurt for so long that I was a bad person. I was worthless. I wasn't going to amount to anything. And then for some God that says that it's a God to tell me I was even more worthless? No, absolutely not.
Okay, so really when you're down to it, you're not an atheist. You weren't an agnostic.
No.
You just don't want anything to do with God.
I didn't want nothing.
You and him aren't talking.
Nope. He stays on his lane. I would stay on mine.
But the good thing he doesn't stay in his lane, right?
Right, right.
Okay, all right. All right, so you grew up, you know, it's so funny. People that come from controlled environments, generally speaking, then become controlling themselves. Do you think that happened to you?
Absolutely, because I ended up wanting power and control. I was in justice for so long as a child that I grew up becoming that person, wanting to rule my surroundings, wanting to control what is brought into my life and what is not, what is okay and what isn't. And I made that, and the world created that in me as well, because I allowed that filth and that junk to, you know, submerge myself into.
And you started drinking and toking weed at a pretty young, how young was that?
I was like 13, 14 years old.
13, wow. Now, what did you think? Your friends doing this, or you found it through school? How did you find it?
So my mom and my dad would smoke weed and drink.
In the house?
Yeah.
With you there?
Yeah.
Well, that's a rather not good example.
Yeah. No, it wasn't, you know, and it was a learned behavior, right? So the smoking cigarettes and drinking and stuff like that was norm for our home. And so when I ended up doing it, I just masked the hurt that was being caused, because my brother also became an abuser. So my brother would abuse me when my when my dad wasn't and my mom wasn't home.
So he's slapping you around as well.
Beating me to almost death sometimes.
Well, now this is surprising to me, and maybe you can give us an insight. You know, this behavior, you started seeking out gangs.
Yes.
Now, why would you? I mean, I would think men in gangs are somewhat machoistic by nature and would be abusive towards women. Did I miss it?
Right, right. But see, as the woman that I was creating in myself, I wanted to be a man that was able to control her surroundings. So I surrounded myself around very powerful men and did what they did. I wasn't the female of the crew. I was the girl, of course, but I was also doing manly things.
So let me. I just want to make sure. You know, sometimes I look at, you know, the Lord can take us and he can change us. There's an aspect of womanhood that is a tender gender, not a tough gal, right? Not your heart is seared and tough. And now you're telling me at a young age you're steeling yourself, you know, making yourself hard against the normal, maybe even the normal womanhood.
Yes.
There's a loss there. But then you just quickly got into meth. Now, how fast did that happen? What age were you doing that?
So as the abuse and everything, about 15, 16, I was introduced to meth, and I didn't really like it at first because I thought it was a hallucinogenic, and I didn't want to get into anything like that. But they told me the great things about it, right? You know, because I was raised a little heavier, and they gave me the inspiration. Oh, you lose weight, you don't eat, you can stay up as long as you want, and it's going to be great. You know, all the
Well, are all those things right?
Right.
You do lose weight.
Exactly.
You can stay up forever.
Right.
It's like the old 60s in my day. We were doing speed just to get through final exams, right?
And you become cool,
Yeah.
10 feet tall and bulletproof, right? And no controlling that whole demonized mindset that I desired that I wasn't able to have because of the female. So the meth made me 10 feet tall and bulletproof.
Now, when you continued to do this, did you actually transfer from being a user to, hey, there could be money in this? It takes money to do meth. It takes money to buy weed. You know what I mean? So where's this funding coming from?
So you become a /user dealer because you make money to get high, right? So you sell a little bit here and there. But as I created my own world of darkness, I was in the gangs. And so I had people around me saying, Vanessa, you're better than being a dope head. You can be more than that and better than that. And so a dope head to a dope dealer, I mean, if in my world, that was probably better.
Major step up.
Major step up. You're doing big things.
It's kind of like a multi-level marketing organization. Well, when I'm thinking about this, you know that the Bible actually uses this phrase for the word sorcery. It's called pharmakos. The original Greek word for that is pharmakos. For sorcery, which is translated in ours, of course, drugs. Do you see, I'm just asking, do you see something, an entry level into that kind of world?
Absolutely.
So it translates pretty fast in the spiritual realm.
Absolutely.
See, to me, that's another surprise, right? You're doing dope, but you don't really realize it at the time it occurred.
Yes.
Well, when we come back on our second segment, we're going to get more into Vanessa's life. We're going to talk about some of these things. Listen, if you're listening to her story and saying, hey, listen, I have that story, that's me, you want to listen up. We're going to be here all this week, Monday through Friday. In the first 3 days, it's going to be the bad boy behavior of Vanessa's life and part of her story. And you could find remedies like she's going to talk about later on in the week. I'm Steve Savant. You're listening to 180. We'll be right back, right after this break. Okay. I want you to come this way. There you go. Okay. I want to see that face.
You know the road to recovery can be difficult.
I'm sorry?
You don't have to travel it alone. Every Friday night,
This?
like-minded women gather together to share a meal and their stories, how they broke the destructive cycles in their lives by the power of God and moved on to a new life in Christ.
Like this?
For more information about Friday nights, just go out to their website at beyondfeartofreedom.org. If you can't get to BFF on Friday nights, or you don't live in the Phoenix area,
Is that good?
you can stay connected by joining BFF's Subscribe Tribe, where you'll receive their weekly study guide, so you can track with them online. Just
I think so.
sign up today
What?
on BFF's website at
Oh, thank you.
beyondfeartofreedom.org.
Thank you.
Don't forget to listen to BFF's weekly video podcast with Debbie G and Sharon. Their own life experiences and their biblical influence will overhaul your thinking, your identity, and your future. They'll keep you encouraged with some great insight and biblical truths. Just friend them on Facebook or go out to their website at beyondfeartofreedom.org. BFF, where you might just discover a best friend forever.
Well, welcome back to our second segment, and we're with Vanessa Sarzoza, listening to her story, a descent into the dark side. I mean, honestly, when you think about, being a meth head, and now you're talking about a dealer, you're not even 18 yet, right? You're hoofing it, you're woofing and muling everybody's product out on the street. How do you graduated to the big time? I think you think that, and there's money in this, right?
Right.
So you're not only just buying dope now, you're buying nice clothes, or the clothes that you like that make you look bad.
Right. I'm buying the cars, the houses, living that style.
But it's not Barbie doll style.
But it's, yeah.
Yeah, no.
No.
Nobody goes out of their way. I'm asking you, Vanessa, well, I've known you for a long time. Nobody goes out of their way to trade in their Barbie dolls to be a meth head.
No.
Right? I mean, you don't wake up someday at 8 years of age and say, hey, I can't wait to get out of the streets, own the neighborhood, be bad in my neighborhood, and do dope, right?
Right.
I mean, so there's a transition in your thinking, and a lot of this, instead of being influenced at home in the good way, the home actually pushed you out the door.
It did. It made me create my love somewhere else, right? Finding that love and that understanding in that world that is accepting, right? Love you for who you are. No matter what you have to do, no matter what you have to say or act or think, you want somebody to care for you. That unconditional love. And I looked for it in the powerness of the world and the darkness of the world, because the more that you were feared, and the more that you were in control of your own world, was the more that it attracted me to that person, and I wanted to be like them.
Well, I noticed in your story you are totally into power and control. I mean,
I was.
And the thing about it is, you said you never cracked the Bible during this time.
Nope. The whole time I was alive, I never looked into, because I literally lived up to that statement you stay in your lane and I'll stay in mine. When I used to go to jail and I would see these women, they'd be praising Jesus in the jails and
Going to
and
chapel.
then going to chapel, doing Bible studies, and as soon as they came out, they were back at my house buying dope. And I'm like, you know what, that's pitiful. Why are you going to use that just to get out when you know you're going to do the same thing? So me, I was going to be faithful to the streets, 100% loyalty, no matter what.
Well, your story goes on about this episode when you're now living in Arizona, right? Or were you pulled over in New Mexico?
No, so I was dealing in New Mexico, and I would travel to Arizona to pick
Oh, now
it
you're
up.
interstate commerce.
I was interstate commerce, yes.
Okay, so you get in Arizona and you get pulled over.
Yes, I was leaving. As I picked up and I was leaving Arizona, I got pulled over in Salt River Canyon.
What was the original pullover? Speeding?
So it was just looking like a suspect.
Oh my gosh. Well, of course, you're seeing Vanessa. We'll have this on YouTube, of course, next week. But when you see Vanessa today, this is not the gal that's in the pictures I have seen.
Yes.
So yeah.
Very dark and very suspect looking.
Yeah. So they just pulled you over on your looks.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Well, okay, you get pulled over, and they go to search your vehicle. You're not worried about the things in your vehicle.
No, I was not worried because as a criminal mind, you already have a second thought of what's going to happen, your plan B.
Okay, and the typical storage bin for dope in those days was?
Your bra.
Your bra. Okay, so we're stuffing it down our bra.
So I had a little bit on me when I even left New Mexico, and I still had it on me thinking I would get rid of it. I got stopped and pulled over, and they searched the vehicle. I was okay with that, but what I was worried about is that I had drugs on me. I had 7 grams of meth on my being, and that was going to pin me to what was in the car. And I knew that, and I was already on probation in New Mexico.
Okay, so you've already been arrested once.
I've arrested, yes, and
Now,
probation.
You were not married during this time.
I was not married. I was nothing. I was still a child.
Any children at
Yes,
this time?
I had a son.
You had a son.
Yes.
That's a whole nother part of this package, isn't it?
Yes.
All right, so you got caught in Arizona. Your son's back in New Mexico?
Yes.
Who's watching him?
My friends.
Your friends. Your friends that are
My
all dope
gang
heads.
members. No, they're not dope heads. They were drug dealers.
Oh, they're drug dealers. Okay, so they're not doing it. They're in the revenue issue.
Yes.
Okay, so how did you think you felt from a maternal point of view about your son and when you had to leave him with these people? You're okay with that?
Absolutely.
So nothing crossed your mind, hey, this might be a bad way to get a babysitter.
I lived with them for close to 5 years. They were a family to me. They were more of a family to me than my own family was. And so I trusted them with my life, my family, my son, not my family, but my son, like nobody's business.
They pull you over, they take you downtown,
Yep.
you head into the jail. Did you expect yourself to get frisked or to have to strip down? Is that what the fear was driving?
Yes.
Okay.
So as I was in the back of the vehicle, I was fear-drawn because I knew that I needed to get rid of these drugs that were on me. So what I did is I swallowed the 7 grams. And mind you, I was clean for 2.5 years before I swallowed this. I did drugs
I mean,
for
you
years.
swallowed the drug in a balloon, or you swallowed
in a sandwich bag.
in a sandwich? That's a
Like-
lot of sandwich bag to get down
Yep.
your throat.
And I swallowed it and I choked it down, and I figured I'm just going to go to jail and they're just going to throw me in a cell and I can throw it up. Well, that was totally wrong. They sent me into a questioning room and they were questioning me and saying all these crazy things to me, and we were fighting back and forth. They slammed the door and I'm sitting there, and I guess the acids in my stomach was just eating away at that bag. The mess started seeping out of that bag, and I went into the most extreme overdose. I think it's unimaginable what I went through.
Do you think they understood what was going on at the time?
No, because they didn't see me until I knew I was sitting there convulsing uncontrollably, and I started banging on the wall and says, I'm going to die in here. And they come in and they're like, what did you take? I says, it doesn't matter, I'm dying. And that's all I remember. And to find out I was 95% dead before the ambulance even came.
So they call the ambulance, they're coming to get you, and the ER guys, the first responders, are saying this girl's almost DOA.
Yep.
Yeah,
dead.
wow, dead on arrival. I'm just trying to conceive of you getting to the hospital And you're telling me the guys in the ER had to keep you alive. You almost died, what, 3-4 times?
I died 4 times on the way to the hospital. My body was convulsing so hard that I was breaking the straps on the gurney.
Oh my gosh.
It was out of control. I mean, I felt like I was dying. I was dying. I went brain dead on the table, the doctor stated, and that if I ever came out of that, they told my family that I would be a vegetable.
Okay, so you're in a coma.
I'm in a coma.
Okay. All right. When you went into coma, that lasted for some time, right? 4 or 5 days?
4 days.
4 days. And during this time, you have no conscious understanding or
Nope.
remembrance of any of this?
None of it.
Now, you say in retrospect there was a spiritual warfare going on at this time. Give me a little insight on that.
So after I got out of my coma and I went back home, one of my friends told me, he says, "Do you remember what you told me in the hospital?" And I said, "No." And he said, I asked him to kill me. And I didn't believe him at first, so I asked my mom, and my mom said, yes. I woke up out of my coma. I went into that. I told everybody that was faith-based, because I didn't know, who was there, but I apparently told everybody to leave the room. And I asked my friend to come in, and only him. And I asked him to kill me because I was in so much pain that I couldn't take it anymore.
This amazing thought, the spirit of suicide in the unconscious mind is trying to take you out, and you don't even, this is kind of beyond your free will here.
Absolutely.
So you have stuff that is happening. I mean, we talk about this all the time. This happens in prison, jail. So this is a very dangerous issue. This is another secondary danger of dope just by itself.
Absolutely.
Okay, so when you got out, you kind of felt like you lost your mental capacity, right? I mean, you went from gangsta woman, right?
Right.
To kind of mental.
Yes.
If you don't mind me using that word.
Yes, absolutely. I woke up out of my coma and I didn't even know how to speak. I couldn't carry a conversation. I didn't have any mind that was able to say the things. I knew what I was thinking, but I couldn't spit them out. My brain was disconnected from my body, and because of that, it caused a whole bunch of issues in my body. Like I woke up with atrophy. I couldn't walk, and I couldn't talk, and my head would shake, and I would stutter so badly. And the lady in the hospital kept telling me, "If you can walk, Vanessa, we will release you."
Oh, why is that, by the way? I'm just curious.
And it's so strange, right? At first, I didn't understand why she would say that, because I knew I was going to jail, because I died in the questioning room, But to find out, the officers left me for dead. I was so far gone that
they thought you were gone.
They didn't think I was going to come out of that hospital walking.
So they just forgot you, and that was the end of that.
Yeah, and so my mom was there, and my mom was telling the hospital I had a son and in New Mexico, and that I needed to be with him. And so I think they felt bad for me. And so they would whisper to me, "Vanessa, if you can walk, we release you." Well, in a day, I started walking, just barely down and they released me. I was so messed up. My heart would go from 130 down to 60, and it was a horrible experience, very horrible.
Well,
horrible
what's it
experience.
like to be a grown woman and I cannot walk?
Scary.
What is that like? I mean,
Scary,
did you ever
worthless.
consider this could be I could be paralyzed for the rest of my life?
Absolutely, absolutely. I was scared because, like you said, I went from gangster to nothing within days.
When you're thinking your head, when you go through things like this, you just lose your faculties and your reasoning, your logic, and your head becomes basically mush.
Right.
And you had a hard time just making, having understanding, comprehending what was going around you.
Yeah, the worst thing was about my son. I was sitting there, and next thing you know, he is coming up to me and he's like, "Mom, help me with my homework." And he's a kindergartner. He's 5 years old. He doesn't know. I'm sitting there shaking, my head shaking, my eyes shaking. I couldn't control my voice. And I'm looking at this paper and I'm like, I can't even understand what was on this page. And because of that, I knew that I needed to get away from my son. I knew that I couldn't allow him to see me like that anymore.
We're going to pick this story up tomorrow and you can listen to it. Listen, I just want to say, head out to beyondfeartofreedom.org. Check out their Friday nights. And so until next time, remember, no one's outside the reach of God. No, not one.